The Icy Whisper. Despair and icy captivity. The frigid air bit at his face, penetrated beneath the coarse wool lining his jacket collar, and burned his lungs with every breath. Captain Olafsson, whose face was creased with wrinkles like an old map of polar winds, exhaled a cloud of vapor and pulled his hat down tighter. In his faded eyes could be read not only weariness, but stubborn determination. The season had been wretched. Debts hung around his neck like a heavy burden, and every mile traveled brought nothing but new ice fragments that scraped threateningly against the hull of their aging fishing schooner, the Victoria. The crew consisted of 3. Lars, a young, impetuous fellow whose hands were as strong as his youthful ambitions, but whose eyes had also begun to dim from monotony and cold. Knut, silent and superstitious, whose ancestors had sailed these waters for centuries, and who sensed any change in the air as keenly as an old dog senses an approaching storm. And Johan, a pragmatist whose faith in numbers and facts was unshakable, but whose nervousness grew with each empty day. They were making their way through the silent, endless ice field, where time seemed to have stopped. Around them, as far as the eye could see, stretched a deathly white labyrinth of gigantic, silent icebergs. Some resembled soaring cathedrals of ice, others grotesque monsters frozen in eternal silence. The sun hung low over the horizon, casting long blue shadows on the snow and painting the sky in unearthly shades of purple and orange, which provided no warmth. The only sound was the solitary, rhythmic thump of the Victoria's diesel engine, and the constant, oppressive creak of the hull rubbing against enormous ice floes. This was their last, desperate voyage. Their final attempt to find seals or narwhals before winter completely locked the ocean in ice. "Empty, Captain, empty!" Lars's voice, standing on the lookout platform, rang across the deck like a funeral bell. He lowered his binoculars. Not a tail or fin in sight. Olafsson nodded. He knew this. The hunting was dead, but he could not turn back. Not now. In human discovery, they pushed further north, deeper into the icy wilderness, to places where even the most desperate rarely ventured. The cold intensified, and the icebergs grew even more massive, their surfaces covered with ancient cracks like scars from long past epochs. Johan, who stood at the wheel, suddenly braked the vessel hard, causing everyone to stagger. "What's there?" Lars asked irritably, descending the gangway. "See for yourself." Johan's voice was muffled, almost reverent. Directly ahead, among the labyrinth of ice floes, drifted a gigantic iceberg, but this one was unlike the others. Through its thickness, in its very heart, a shadow was visible. At first it seemed like a play of light and ice, a bizarre swirl or fragment of rock. But when the Victoria slowly, cautiously approached closer, there could be no doubt. There was some creature inside. It was enormous, much larger than any seal or walrus they had ever seen. Its outline was strange, unnatural, unlike any known creature. The body, if it was a body, seemed to have too many joints, its limbs arranged differently from earthly animals, creating a sense of angular, frightening geometry. The creature's shell or skin had an unnatural blue-black color, almost light-absorbing, and was covered with bumpy growths that seemed simultaneously organic and carved, like ancient, alien script. It seemed frozen not merely in ice, but in a moment of unimaginable torment or strange, forgotten ritual. Knut, seeing this, paled and crossed himself. Ancient, devilish signs, he muttered, turning away. But Olafsson, with his weary but predatory gaze, saw not a devil, but a sensation. He surveyed the crew. This isn't just a fish, lads. This is something that could change everything. We'll cut it out. Despite the cold, they lowered the lifeboat. The work was hellish. The ice resisted, breaking away in huge, unyielding chunks. The frost penetrated to their bones, while above them loomed the monstrous mass of the iceberg, threatening to collapse at any moment. Hours that seemed like eternity dragged on in silent, exhausting struggle with the frozen elements and the unknown. Finally, after much effort, the creature was freed. It was a colossal, sleeping nightmare whose forms, even in ice, evoked intuitive revulsion. They carefully transported the frozen creature aboard the schooner using winches and chains, and secured it in the hold, covering it with tarpaulin. Johann feverishly calculated potential profit in his mind, while Lars already dreamed of the glory that would fall upon them. Only Knut stood apart, watching them with a grim, condemning look. He knew they had taken aboard not prey, but a curse. First night. Sleeping whispers. The first night after the discovery descended upon the Victoria heavily and inhospitably. The frost intensified, and wind howled in the rigging, carrying across the ice field only soul-chilling creaks. The crew, exhausted by physical labor and nervous tension, retired to their bunks, dreaming of oblivion in sleep. Captain Olafsson, a man of strong character, slept restlessly. He dreamed a strange, soundless dream where he swam through endless depths, surrounded by deathly blue light. There, below, something enormous and incomprehensible awaited him, its forms eluding comprehension, but he could sense a colossal, oppressive presence. He awoke in a cold sweat, with the feeling that someone or something had been watching him from the very darkness. Lars tossed and turned, his dreams full of unclear images, writhing shadows, the screech of stone against stone, and a feeling of cold penetrating his bones, not from Arctic air, but from something else. He woke with a throbbing headache and a vague sense of anxiety he couldn't explain. Johann, the most pragmatic of them, dismissed his vague, unpleasant dreams as consequences of fatigue and a poor dinner. But even he couldn't shake the feeling that the dream had been too real, too piercing. Only Knut barely slept at all. He felt it. From the moment they had brought the creature aboard, the air on the schooner had changed. It was heavy, saturated with unnatural cold, and something ancient, alien. Knut heard unclear rustling and scraping from the hold that couldn't be caused by the ship's movement. He spent the night sitting on his bunk, clutching in his hand an old narwhal horn amulet inherited from his ancestors, and listening to the silent whisper that seemed to emanate from the ice itself. Disturbing day and rising tension. Day arrived, bringing only ghostly, diffused light. The sun never appeared, hidden behind a veil of thick fog. Around the Victoria stretched the same icy labyrinth, now even more oppressive. The crew hadn't slept well. Everyone was irritated, their nerves stretched to the breaking point. The failed trip, the cold, the monotony of the landscape, and now this strange, frozen creature in the hold, all of it was taking its toll. Each was absorbed in thoughts of the empty hold and losses they would have to bear. Words broke off mid-sentence. Glances were wary. Lars snapped at Johan, and Olafsson paced the deck with arms crossed over his chest, his gaze heavy. Knut remained silent, but his anxiety grew. He saw how the ice on the creature in the hold seemed to become slightly more transparent, as if something was changing beneath it. He imagined unclear reflections within the icy shell, and sometimes felt a tingling in his temples, as if someone was trying to penetrate his thoughts. He tried to speak with the captain about needing to get rid of the find, but Olafsson only waved him off, muttering about value and sensation. By evening, tension aboard the ship had risen to an unbearable level. It seemed someone was watching them, remaining invisible, but their presence was felt in every cell of their bodies. The cold from the hold became more piercing, and now it was not merely physical, it was internal, an icy horror penetrating the very soul. Soon would come the second night, and with it, new nightmares. Second night. Call from the depths. The second night aboard the Victoria descended upon the crew like a heavy, frosty blanket. The cold from the hold grew even greater. It penetrated the deck and bulkheads, making even hardened sailors shiver. The air was heavy, saturated with the same acrid, metallic smell that Knut had sensed since yesterday. That night, dreams became nightmares. Johan thrashed on his bunk, his breathing labored. He dreamed of immense, dark waters, in which colossal shadows moved slowly, while from the depths came a low, drawn-out voice calling somewhere. He didn't understand the words, but the intonation was hypnotic, inexorable, filling him with horror and strange, burning desire to submit. In his dream, Lars saw irregular shapes, alien symbols engraved on ice, and heard a many-voiced, mad whisper that grew, penetrating his consciousness, erasing the boundaries between dream and reality. He woke, feeling his sanity slowly fracturing. Even Captain Olafsson, usually unshakable, spent the night struggling with terrifying visions. He saw himself trapped in eternal permafrost, while beside him, as if in mockery, danced the creature from the ice, its forms distorting and taking impossible shapes. He heard a voice deep, resonating, but now more distinct than in Johan's dream, seeming to emanate from within his very skull, calling him to something ancient and terrible. All awoke unrested, with red eyes that seemed to burn. Yesterday's irritation had turned into open hostility. Every word echoed in stretched nerves. Minor disagreements became quarrels. Fatigue from the failed voyage, pressure from the empty hold, and now these frightening dreams merged into one continuous, oppressive feeling of doom. Knut, the only one who hadn't slept much anyway, felt the anxiety in his soul reach its peak. He saw how the shadows under his comrades' eyes had grown darker, how their gaze had become strange, detached. He felt pulsation emanating from the hold. It was so strong it resonated in his teeth, and the cold emanating from it was now unbearable, penetrating to his bones. He knew it was awakening. Shore on the horizon, and final cargo inspection. Finally, when the last pale dawn began breaking through the frosty fog, a thin strip of land appeared on the horizon. Shore, there was their home port. Home! This sight seemed to breathe new life into the exhausted crew. All thoughts of dreams, cold, and mounting horror momentarily retreated. They were almost home. Captain Olafsson, despite the internal trembling, felt a surge of strength. He contacted the port by radio, his voice hoarse but determined. They were expected. The thought of the coming end to this cursed voyage was the only joy that warmed them at all. When the Victoria slowly, heavily began entering coastal waters, Captain Olafsson felt a sudden, irresistible urge. He had to check the cargo, check the creature. Soon, he would show it to the world. Maybe it wasn't there, maybe it was all just a dream, fatigue. He descended the creaking gangway into the hold. The atmosphere there was not merely cold, it was physically tangible, heavy, oppressive. The air was stale, filled with the same metallic, ancient smell, and it seemed the cold itself was vibrating. From under the tarpaulin covering the creature emanated a weak, pulsing glow, ghostly, deathly blue light. Olafsson extended his hand toward the creature, and as he pulled back the heavy tarpaulin, his fingers trembled perceptibly. Before him lay it. The ice around the creature had become thinner, almost transparent, and the captain saw its form more clearly than ever. But the most terrible thing was not this. Slowly, lazily, its eyes opened. They were enormous, black, bottomless voids, in which there were neither pupils nor whites. These were eyes of lifeless, cosmic emptiness, reflecting only hunger and endless, ancient indifference. From them emanated such piercing, absolute cold that it burned Olafsson's soul. The captain froze. He could not move. The black, bottomless gaze of the creature pinned him in place, paralyzing every muscle and nerve in his body. Horror gripped his throat, preventing him from making a sound. His mind, his will, his soul, everything was seized, absorbed by this abyss of black eyes that were now directly before him. Finale. Empty ship at the dock. The fishing vessel crashed bow first into the pier, with a dull, echoing impact that attracted the attention of dock workers. The screech of metal, crack of wood. People on shore watched in surprise at the uncontrolled schooner. Where was the crew? The first curious ones climbed aboard. The Victoria looked abandoned, no one on deck. Only empty barrels rolled from side to side with the ship's gentle rocking, like silent witnesses to recent events. Around reigned strange, ringing silence, broken only by the splash of waves at the pier and the occasional creak of rigging. The dock workers descended into the hold, where they knew cargo was transported. From there wafted an unnatural, penetrating cold that made them involuntarily shiver. But the hold was empty. No crew. No mysterious creature. Only strange, unnatural scratches on the wooden beams, as if from huge, curved claws, and barely visible, oily, non-freezing slime on the floor. And a faint, elusive smell, metallic, putrid, and incredibly ancient, which remained in the air for a long time. The mystery remained forever unsolved. The creature had vanished. The sailors had vanished. No one ever learned what happened that night aboard the Victoria, only the empty, damaged ship, having become a mute witness to their fatal mistake, and the story of how Arctic cold claimed its victims would linger in port legends, multiplying terrible conjectures.